We're going to begin. I'm going to play a song, and then I'll talk.
From the depths of slumber as I ascend the spiral stairways of wakefulness, I will whisper, whisper, guide, guide, guide. Thou art the food, and when I break my fast of nightly separation from thee, I will taste thee and mentally say, God, God, God. No matter where I go, the spotlight of my mind will ever keep turning on thee. And in the battle din of activity, my silent war cry will be, God, God, God. When boisterous storms of trials shriek, and when worries howl at me, I will drown their noises, loudly chanting, God, God, God. When my mind weaves dreams, with threads of memories, on that magic cloth will I emboss, God, God, God. Every night in time of deepest sleep, when my peace dreams and calls joy, joy, my joy comes singing evermore, God, God, God. In waking, eating, working, dreaming, sleeping, serving, meditating, chanting, divinely loving, my soul will constantly hum, unheard by any.
When I first came onto the spiritual path, I read Autobiography of a Yogi, and I realized that there was a reality to God, that God was true, that I didn't know how to define that. I didn't know how to say, well, what is God, or how I could experience God. But one of the things that I very quickly understood was that this idea of God was the solution, the resolution to my unhappiness, to feeling that I was never satisfied, to feeling that I was somehow lost and I didn't know who I was and I didn't know what to do with myself and life had no purpose and life was empty. Suddenly, it was filled with something. It was filled with God. And people write books about God and intellectualize. Recently, in their in the news, Stephen Hawking, who's well known for scientific theories on astrophysics and such, he has a completely new theory about black holes. So now they're something completely different than what everybody thought. And this is the way most people live in their opinions, in their sense that whatever they think must be right, that their point of view is well, I always want to say it's valid. Everybody's point of view is valid. Well, yes, everyone has the right to a point of view, but that doesn't make it correct. And there's a big difference. Yeah, we can run around, put a blindfold on, and bang against the walls if we want. And we should have the right to do that. But that doesn't mean it's the most practical way to live. And it doesn't mean that you can accomplish things as well. And most importantly in life, how can we actually be happy? How can we actually make sense of everything that goes on in life? If you just look at it on the surface, it's chaos. It just doesn't make any sense. But when you feel God, suddenly it all makes sense. Suddenly, all questions are answered. Even if you couldn't say what the answer is, somehow you feel it's answered. So many times we think, well, okay, if I just get myself together, then I'll find God. I'll just do this and then I'll find God. And then I'll, somehow creating the perfect circumstance will solve all my problems. And the reality is that doesn't work. That as long as we seek God in some outward circumstance, we will miss the point. The point of God is that God is always present and that God is experienced from the inside out, not the outside in. You can go, there's many ashrams around the world. You won't find God there. The people haven't found God there. No, there are some where they have. What's the difference? It's because they are actually present inside. They're present in their relationship with God. They're connected to God. We had such a beautiful satsang yesterday with Nayaswami Vijay. Wasn't that just wonderful? And she spoke beautifully, and all of the words that made sense. But it took me back, and one of the reasons why I played this song with Swami Kriyananda is because it took me back to what I found when I first came to Ananda. And I had wandered as a teenager. I was in New Zealand looking for a place to just disappear from the life that made no sense to me. But I couldn't do it. I was on the beach. I knew I needed just to meditate and surf. That was all I needed to do. Well, it doesn't get any better than that. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And then, through a series of what we say coincidences, but you can definitely see the hand of spirit behind it when you look back at it. I was led to Ananda. And when I came to Ananda, I found that I was the same. But somehow in the atmosphere of these other God-seeking people, I was somehow improved. I was somehow able to do things that I hadn't done before. And when I sat and listened to Swami Kriyananda sing just this beautiful song, I could feel it. It was, not all of it, but I could feel God. Not all of God, but that's God. That presence. That unbelievable presence that dissolves every life agitation. Doesn't matter what problems we have. As soon as we feel that touch, everything's okay. And if we don't feel that touch, it'll never be okay. You can live in the biggest palace on the planet with the most number of servants and have a bottomless savings account, and you'll never be happy compared to that feeling, to that being in that presence. This song, God, 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 has a story to it. Yoganandaji wrote those words. It's one of his poems from Whispers from Eternity. And he said that he was inspired to write that as a result of a vision that he had of St. Francis, who a master said was the patron saint of the path of self-realization. And he had this vision of St. Francis, and while he watched St. Francis speak in this vision, suddenly these words came to him. And so he wrote them down. And then Swami Kriyananda, many years later, obviously had been inspired by Master's poem. And he prayed to God that a melody would come to him. And then and this had happened to him numerous times, in a dream. In a dream, the melody came to him, and when he woke up, he wrote it down. And when you listen to, of course, for me, I can't imagine anybody not feeling what I feel when I listen to it. But I can only say when I listen to Swamiji sing this song, my soul just thrills. It just makes me feel good inside. And it brings to mind all of those moments in the presence. We talk about satsang, we talk about the fellowship. But the fellowship is with that presence. When you feel that presence, that's it. We talk about meditation and sadhana and kriya and all these things we're supposed to do. The only thing we really have to do is be in that presence. And the reason that we do all of those things is to get into that presence. And if we could get into that presence, we wouldn't need to do all those things. But everything that we do, we want to recognize that the point of it is to be in that presence, is to feel that presence, to feel God's presence. And this is why, I often talk about this, about take God out of the meditation room. Yes, we seek to go deeper in meditation. We awaken our ability to feel God's presence in meditation. But we need to bring God, whatever we feel in meditation, out into everyday life, into everything that we do. And then you can feel God's presence, God's smile, behind the smile of the shopkeeper. Behind even behind the grumpy whoever. You know, people are grumpy sometimes. But that's God behind them. God is being grumpy through them. Maybe that's not God's greatest expression, but it's still a part of God. And the thing is what happens is that if we get grumpy from other people's grumpiness, then we aren't feeling the presence. But if we feel the presence, then their grumpiness can't touch us, and maybe we'll share some of that presence with them. Maybe they'll feel a little bit of it, the way we felt it yesterday. And then, there's that story of Master when he was walking down the street once, and a man who was drunk came up to him. And the drunk man said to Master, he said, "Hello, Jesus Christ." and Yoganandaji said, "Yeah, well, hello." And could see that the man was under the influence. And Master decided to give him a little touch of the presence. So he just gave him a little touch. And the drunk man said, "Hey, what are you drinking?" And Master said, "Well, it has a lot of kick in it." Just a little bit of the touch, a little bit of the presence. Whenever you hear the stories in the old stories about the healings, that's in the presence. And all of the stories about people who conquered their challenges, somehow they got into the presence. And of course, when you read about the souls that finally become freed in spirit, or at least enter into samadhi, conscious oneness of all of the presence, not just some of the presence. This is our path. This is an unbelievable thing that we have stumbled across, that has been revealed to us, that we can experience the presence. I remember when I was growing up, the movie The Ten Commandments came out by Cecil B. DeMille. And it was really, and they had some special effects when he parted the Red Sea. It's really quite dramatic and full color. And they used to make movies in those days, real spectacles. I mean, they had thousands of extras, lots of people, big. And Moses went up on the mountain to find God, to seek God. And God was depicted as a burning bush. It was God was just a bush and it was burning. It wasn't like it was causing fire anywhere else, and it wasn't depleting in any way. There wasn't any smoke. But somehow God was a burning bush, and this is the impression that people have about, if you seek God, you aren't going to find much. Wow, a burning bush. They totally missed the presence. They depict it as Moses right away go, "Yes, sir." It's like in many Christian sects, they talk about to fear God. You should fear God. And they say, we're God-fearing people. Wow, that's a completely different view than recognizing feeling the bliss of God, the love of God. I'd like to read this poem again and explore it just a little bit. from the depths of slumber as I ascend the spiral stairways of wakefulness. I will whisper, God, God, God. Ascending the spiral stairways of wakefulness. This is how we rise in spirit. We become awake. We're asleep now. They say what is day to the worldly man is night to the yogi, and what is night to the yogi is day to the worldly man. Wakefulness is the yogi's view, as we become awake in God, that's day. Night is ignorance, the sleep of believing that this body and personality are the reality. But even then, no matter what stage of that we are on our ascension to spirit, whisper, God, God, God. Thou art the food, and when I break my fast of nightly separation from thee, I will taste thee and mentally say, God, God, God. Master used to call sleep fake samadhi. There is a certain bliss of emptiness, and certainly there are some sects. Many Buddhists meditate with this thought of just being empty, and I know, although sleep, the practical matter of sleep is different for different people. I know one person. When she puts her head down, she falls asleep. The next thing she remembers, she woke up. And that's supposed to be quite good. And if I was into being embarrassed, I might be embarrassed to say, I don't sleep like that. My mind is very active when I'm sleeping. But like Swamiji, I occasionally have very meaningful dreams. And so I kind of like that side of it. But the point is that when we sleep, when we're asleep, we can't really, generally we don't perceive. But when we're awake, we can perceive. And the more conscious we are, like even in sleep, you can have conscious dreams where, like when Swamiji was inspired by this, the melody came to him in a dream. We can be awake in the dream of the physical world as we become more conscious of God's presence. No matter where I go, the spotlight of my mind will ever keep turning on thee. And in the battle din of activity, my silent war cry will be, God, God, God. See, this is the practical teaching. Wherever I go, no matter what I'm doing, even in the battle of daily life, my mind is focused on God. If we can just see it, that even if you're doing accounting, even if you're doing any what we would describe as mundane task, or tasks that even when they take your full concentration, feel that God is concentrating through you. Feel that God is manifesting as the subject that you're giving your attention. Always just bring your mind into the sense that that the God presence is always present. It's really that easy in the sense that, again, we may not feel all the presence, but the more we allow ourselves to feel it, the more attention we give to the possibility of feeling it, the greater the chance that we'll feel it. And as we walk down the path of life, we will feel more and more of it. We just have to practice it. We have to unhypnotize ourselves from not feeling it. When boisterous storms of trials shriek, And when worries howl at me, I will drown their noises, loudly chanting, God, God, God. See, this is a more common thing that people do is when life's going bad, when life is not good, then, oh my God. Well, that's good though. I mean, better late than never. So God is not upset, but when we come to him only with our problems. But at the same time, look how much we're missing out. And not only that, is how did we get into trouble in the first place? What can we do to stop getting into trouble? So it's both sides. The more we live in God's presence, the less trouble we get into. But whatever trouble we've gotten ourselves into, the less we're affected by it, by living in the presence. So it solves all challenges. It doesn't matter what's going on in life. The solution is to feel God's presence. And when we don't feel it, act like you feel it. Imagine it. Enter into it. Pray for it. When my mind weaves dreams with threads of memories, on that magic cloth will I emboss God, God, God. When we look at our lives, when we look at the places that we've been and all the things that we've done, we need to realize that God is the tour guide. God has made the arrangements for this experience. And God has been present in every moment of that experience. When we look at our lives, when we think about what we've done, instead of thinking, my child and I did this or that, or my loved one, we should be thinking God was doing that with us. I'm not saying you need to leave out the people that you've shared life with, but recognize that they are all part of God presence. See the God presence through them, rather than getting stuck only on the surface. When we see the God presence in people, then we can see more deeply into how to be with them successfully and meaningfully. And we, in some cases, recognize the value of the relationship and recognize that maybe I shouldn't be spending time with that person. Maybe that person's not really interested in positive vibrations. Maybe they're exploring the nightmare. And if they want to do that, that's fine, but we shouldn't allow ourselves to be drawn into the nightmare. When we bring God, and in fact, if you experience a nightmare when you're sleeping, try, not everybody can consciously dream, but if you open yourself up to this idea, you may find yourself aware that you're dreaming. And once you can become consciously dreaming, then you can begin to play with it a little bit and have some inner adventures and do things like, how many of you have ever flown in your dreams where you were flying? It's okay, we have almost half. And now, were you able to recognize that you were flying, or did you just flew? In other words, did you go, oh, I'm flying? Yeah, okay. And were you able to control it in any way? So that you were, for example, when I realize I'm in a flying dream, I launch myself. I know it's, I'm in a flying dream, okay, let's go! And I literally will dive off a cliff and fly. And that would be, normally you wouldn't do that in life. But I know that I'm in a flying dream and it's okay. So I don't worry that I'm going to crash and get all dead. So you can, and then of course, when you have blessing dreams, when you have dreams of the masters or some circumstance where you feel the God presence. We call these superconscious dreams. These are times when we can feel a blessing and an openness that sometimes our conscious personalities make it more difficult sometimes to be open. And so take your connection to your memories of life, to the things, both pleasant and unpleasant, that you've been through, and consciously feel them in the presence. Feel them as a part of, ultimately we say that whether you enjoy a life experience or not, it's God's grace. Each and every life experience that we have is an opportunity to come closer to God, or to pay some past debt, or to build some positive opportunity. And when we see our past that way, then we can get rid of guilt, we can get rid of many of the attachments and judgments that we have about ourselves that actually hold us back. It says, well, I'm a bad person. I did that thing that I shouldn't have done. And in that thought, we separate ourselves from the presence. Yoganandaji said, you should never call yourself a sinner. He went so far as to say that to call yourself a sinner is the worst sin. Because what you're doing is defining yourself as something less than spirit. And that's a lie. It's just simply not true. It's not correct. Yes, infinite spirit did that thing through your form, but that is not the definition of the whole reality. It's only one little part. Every night, in time of deepest sleep, when my peace dreams and calls joy, 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 my joy comes singing evermore. God, God, God. When we feel God's presence in our lives, then we can rest in peace. Then, they say on the tombstones in America, R.I.P., rest in peace. And many people believe that basically you just kind of sleep. You die and you go to sleep, and it's just emptiness, but peaceful. And so the positive feeling that people go, okay, they had a rough life, they died, whatever happened, may they rest in peace. They think that there's nothing going on afterwards. Resting in peace, retirement, a common view of retirement, at least in years past, is that you basically, you don't have to go to work, you can just put your feet up and relax all day long. Which is boring. To say nothing of it probably isn't going to happen. But we create these very unrealistic images about what life is and how it should be and what would make it perfect, when in fact those visions of and images are completely not correct. And yet we can buy into it on a mass scale. And so what if this Stephen Hawking is right, and for so many years they thought something completely wrong about black holes? Well, this is the truth about science from the beginning. They're always wrong because they don't see the whole right. Even if they say, well, okay, everybody accepts the law of gravity, but we don't understand the law of gravity. We just know it's there. We don't know how to circumvent it yet. We will. But we only know a little bit. So in the spiritual life, we know a little bit of the presence. The difference is that just a little bit of infinity is really quite nice. And so the more if we want to understand the truths of life, we have to touch that presence. And in that presence, we find the solution to intellectual challenges, to interpersonal challenges, to financial challenges. It doesn't matter what it is. Okay. in waking, eating, working, dreaming, sleeping, serving, meditating, chanting, divinely loving, my soul will constantly hum, unheard by any. God, God, God. This is really the key, is to bring God into everything that we do. To recognize that you could go into samadhi anywhere, anytime. I mean, you could say as a practical matter you probably won't, but that doesn't mean you couldn't. When Sri Yukteswar gave Yoganandaji samadhi, he didn't have a special ceremony. He didn't say, okay, you've passed the test, and now here's your plaque, or okay, on Saturday evening we'll do the ceremony, and then I'll touch you and you'll go into samadhi. Yoganandaji was having a bad meditation day. His mind was restless, at least this is the story that we're given. And Sri Yukteswar called to him. I love the idea that Sri Yukteswar called to him. Hey, Mukunda, come here. Somehow you don't think of God, people, yelling people's names even. I don't know. And then Master going, don't bother me, I'm meditating. It's so human, it's so unexpected. And then Sri Yukteswar, who's, in another part, we don't really know where he is. We know he's not in the meditation room. And he says, oh, I see the way you're meditating, come out here. And then you can, of course, imagine Master going, oh, no, it's true, I wasn't going deep, And then, like it happens so often in life, unexpected change. And Sri Yukteswar looked at him lovingly and said, okay, I get your yearning. I get your love here. And he touched him. And Yoganandaji's consciousness was freed from the body. And he saw, and he describes in the autobiography of a yogi, the vision that he had, which is only one way to describe the experience of samadhi. But that yearning for the presence, that constant seeking of the presence, you have to seek it, but you have to say it's already here, both at the same time. You have to just be obsessed with it, really. You have to, I like to say, be moderately fanatical. Be a fanatic for God, but use your common sense too. You don't need to go sit under a tree and not get up, because you can bring the presence wherever you are. This is one of the great messages of the times in which we live, is that you can bring the God presence into the workplace, into the home, into everything that you do. And I enjoy this in India. I find that quite often people are very spontaneously kind. And I feel, I think this is true around the world, but there's something about it here in India that includes the God presence, or at least to me. And somehow I receive it in that way. And it's sweet. It's so sweet when you live knowing that God is present in everything that's happening. And again, it doesn't mean you see all of the presence. It just seems as time goes by, you see more of it, you feel more of it. More of that energy can flow through you. It's like the light bulb. Well, a 40-watt light bulb is not as bright as a 100-watt light bulb, but it's still light. It's still shining. It's still beautiful. And as we grow spiritually, it just gets brighter. And we see more of the bandwidth of it, more of the frequencies. But don't doubt that the presence that you feel is God. Don't think, oh, well, I couldn't feel God. Yes, you feel some of God. Enter into that. Seek opportunities to feel it more and more. This is what I found when I came to Ananda, was a place where every activity was an opportunity to feel God's presence. And to be with people, especially like Kriyanandaji, who was so vibrantly committed to that. It didn't matter what we were talking about or what we were doing. You always knew that something to do with the presence could happen. Some insight, some, well, it's not even that. It's not even so much that you would wait for him to say something wise, which he often did, or insightful, but it's just how you feel. And the key is not to wait for that. In other words, you don't have to say, oh, gee, he was so lucky, he was with Swami Kriyananda, and Swami Kriyananda was so lucky that because he was with Yogananda. Yes, you can say that, but the larger reality is that God is still present. God is always present. God, and you don't feel the presence because of that person. It's because you can go somehow through that person, because the presence is everywhere. So even though the bulb might be not as bright, it's still the light. So when we have our Guru Bhais, when we have each other, we can be inspired. We can see God through each other by going through. And we appreciate the channels, but all of the channels, we're all funny in some way. Master used to say, everybody has their own kind of craziness. And it's humorous, it's cute, it's like when you see a child. The truth is not all children are equally beautiful, equally pleasant to be around. But at the same time, they are all equally children. And somehow, because they're children, we allow them to be who they are and how they are, and we appreciate it. This we should carry on throughout life, to all people. See God behind all forms in life, and appreciate them, even if they're a little crazy. and we were talking about this before satsang today. If we judge life, if we look at life and say, that's bad, that's ugly, I don't like that, then we get caught up in the smaller experience. But when we see that people are a little crazy, but we don't judge them for it, we allow them to be that way. We recognize that God in a limited form is being manifest. And then we can feel the presence. We cannot be caught by that smaller view of life. And that cuts us off from feeling God's presence. So, experiment with this. Take this poem, learn it if you can, if you feel to. But the God, God, God you can easily do. And Yoganandaji also used the God, Christ, Gurus. And just use this as a mantra. And let it roll around in your mind. And practice the presence of, practice being with God. Practice recognizing that God is always present. And practice looking for it. It's like fishermen. Fishermen, they don't know where the fish are, but they keep trying. They keep, and if they don't find fish here, then they find fish there. They keep looking. Keep looking for God. Keep trying to see, is that person, is God in there? And you try to look through them. Try to see God through them. And when you practice doing this, one day, if you haven't already experienced, you go, oh, you'll see them as a spirit and not as a personality. And over the years, I've seen that our view of when we meet people, Asha was talking about this, how Kriyanandaji was saying, didn't observe the color of people's eyes, because he was looking into their souls, not into the body, the physical eye. And I've observed that you begin to see people differently. You no longer see them from the outside, you see them from the inside. And so you recognize that the body is formed the way it is as an emanation from inner energies. And it's not that the outward body determines what's going on the inside. You can begin to perceive life's, their energy, their spirit, the vibrations of their presence. And the more we feel of God's presence, the more we can feel that presence being manifested through others. And then life is a much sweeter experience. Because, if you're having dinner and you have some sweet dish and some sour dish, you go, oh, that's nice. But when you don't feel good, when life's a bad meal, then oh, that's too sweet or that's too sour. And you don't want that. It becomes bitter. And life is very bitter for many people. And the whole key is to shift the way that we're perceiving it, to live in the presence. So practice God, God, God. Live in the presence.